This morning, I'm launching our programme to rebuild and transform Britain. The economy isn't working for millions of people. Real wages have fallen, insecurity and low-paid jobs are spreading, investment is stagnating, corporate scandals are multiplying, and Britain is heading for another downturn. This economic failure is letting people and communities down. As the vote for Brexit shows us, many in our society are not prepared to accept politics as usual. Today, I'm launching a programme that will rebuild our society, a plan that will use the immense potential, skills and talents found across Britain. These 10 pledges are the basis to transform those parts of our country that have been left behind. It will build the new, clean industries of the future and restore pride in our communities and our public services. This programme reflects my belief that a richer, sustainable and more caring world is possible for all of us. It reflects my belief that people deserve rights and dignity at work. It's a programme that will call time on exploitation and discrimination. Under my leadership, Labour will offer every single person in this country the opportunity of learning in an education system that we will make the very best. And we will make sure that every family has a secure home that they can afford. The programme I present today is the basis of a real Labour opposition to a Tory cabinet of landlords, lobbyists and millionaires. I'm standing for leader so that the next Labour government will realise our country's great potential. Join us over the next 2 months as we launch our policies in these 10 areas, setting out how we rebuild and transform Britain so that no one and no community is left behind.
Many of you today might be surprised that a young woman such as myself is on stage speaking to you all before the main man himself, Jeremy Corbyn, greets us all. But I have a story that many people wouldn't expect me to have. Firstly, let me give you my background. My mother, who is sitting in the audience today, is a very strong-willed Labour member. She is currently the Assistant Branch Secretary of Barking and Dagenham Unison and has grown up with socialist values thanks to my amazing granddad. Growing up, I always heard her speak about old Labour, the Labour that was around when my granddad was alive, a Labour that worked to serve the people. Yet as I grew, I saw politicians on my TV that didn't quite serve the people the way that they should. As I got older, I started joining picket lines with my mum during strikes at the school she worked at here in Dagenham. She would have a turnout of at least 30 people, all stood at the front gates with their placards, whilst my mum made sure they all had a hot cup of tea and a friendly face to speak to. I admired her. She was a woman of the people. She was my very own maiden Dagenham. Then in 2011, the time came for me to be a mother. On the 20th of August 2011, at 4:19 a.m, I welcomed my little boy into the world, who was named Bowie, after the legendary David Bowie himself. I brought my son into the world as a single mother, and with the help of my mum, we raised our Bowie United, the best partnership any daughter could ask for. At 2 years old, we started really noticing that Bowie wasn't hitting the milestones that he should be. There was no speech, no eye contact. He didn't play with toys. He would simply line them up or turn them over and spin them round. He was waking up every 2 hours, every single night, and he wouldn't stop crying. He couldn't deal with noisy or busy places, and he used to flap his arms a lot and spin in circles. I blame myself. I thought I was a bad mum, until one day my mum sat me down and explained that Bowie is showing traits of autism. I'd heard of autism before, but didn't really know what it meant. As my mum read the information she had printed out, everything started to fit into place. Wow, Bowie has autism. Straight away, I got the ball rolling, and after a long, hard year, full of having to fight for the therapy and assessments that my son deserved, he was diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. The following year was probably one of the hardest years of my life. Me and Bowie faced discrimination on a daily basis. I was determined to not let autism be a barrier in our lives, so I constantly took Bowie out in public places to try and decrease his social anxiety. Bowie was obsessed with any transport, so trains and buses was a part of our everyday journeys. What we experienced on the trains and buses was something no parent should ever have to go through. Due to Bowie being non-verbal, he would get frustrated very easy. He would hit, bite, scratch, punch and kick me whenever times got hard for him. A lot of these times were out in public due to his social anxiety. I would hear comments on the bus such as, "Oh God, that boy just needs a good slap," or "Someone tell that child to shut up." The last straw for me, funny enough, involved 2 metal spoons. Bowie was obsessed with spoons and would carry them everywhere with him. One day, when we got on the bus, Bowie sat so well in his buggy with 2 metal spoons in his hand, only to be laughed at by a group of teenagers. At this point, I had had enough. So the next day, when we got on the bus again, Bowie pulled out his 2 spoons, and I also pulled out 2 spoons. Soon enough, everyone was staring at the lady holding 2 spoons instead of the child, and it felt great. I felt like I had won the battle because the attention was finally off of my son. Through the constant discrimination I faced, I decided to start a foundation called Awareness for Autism. It was created to help all local families with any questions or queries they may have about autism and educate the general public so that the levels of discrimination could be brought down. 2 years later, I am now on 2,500 supporters and I visit schools, colleges and universities to speak about autism awareness. It's through this foundation that I met my local MP, John Prudis, who has been amazing help to me and supported me through my journey. Also through my foundation and campaigning closely with the National Autistic Society, I spoke at the 2015 Labour Conference, and with the help of John, we managed to get more autism training for teachers in the Labour manifesto for the 2015 general election. My political ambitions, driven by my experiences of looking after my autistic son, had started, but then came David Cameron and his cuts to the disabled people's benefits. Alongside these cuts came cuts to local disabled services, thanks to the Tory government. Enough was enough. In April this year, I arranged a peaceful march from Havering Town Hall to Conservative MP Andrew Rosendale's constituency office. It was about highlighting the impact of the local cuts and him being an MP who voted so heartily in favour of ESA cuts. I had a crowd of 60 strong march alongside me as we chanted, sung, handed out leaflets and handed in letters of protest at both offices. It made headline news locally and I really started to feel like I was making a difference for my son and for so many others like him. Through this march, I was recognised by the BBC as they came and filmed a mini-documentary with me about the EU referendum. The documentary looked at living in an area that predominantly wanted to vote Leave, me being one of the very few to vote Remain. I'm proud of the documentary that was aired because I was proud to be a member of the public not afraid to speak out, not afraid to show my emotion as I spoke in fear of what the future held for my son. Now, what has my story got to do with today? Well, for the first time in a long time, I finally feel like we have a politician who is a man of the people. Jeremy Corbyn fights for the rights of the working class and all that comes with it. From promises of building new council houses, protecting our NHS and taking back our schools into democratic control and oversight, I finally feel like I have a politician I can believe in, and thank God he's Labour. All the stories my mum told me growing up about grassroots Labour, I finally felt like I was getting a taste. I am born and bred Dagenham, I come from council estates, I have paid ridiculously high university fees to educate myself, I have fought for benefits for my son to the point where I had to stand in front of a magistrate's court and prove to them why my son deserved disability living allowance, because unfortunately, Tory government do not simply understand that not every disability is visible. So I spent 8 long months having to use the term severely mentally impaired, the correct terminology that the DWP want us to use, to simply receive money that my son so rightly deserved. And on top of all of this, I've used food banks. I know what it is to make £20 last a whole week, whilst you feed your son spaghetti bolognese from a tin can. I'm tired of being ignored. I'm tired of the vulnerable people in this country getting the raw end of the deal. We need change. We need a leader who believes in equality and a fair democracy, where everyone is counted. We need hope. I'm a strong believer that my son can be whoever he wants to be, because I will continue to campaign so my boy can grow up in a world where he will be judged by his ability and not his disability. At the moment, only 15% of autistic people in the UK work. I want my son to grow in a society where he can leave school and find a job, go to university and not be discriminated against. Thanks to the Tories, we have witnessed greed, lies, humiliation, uncertainty and doubt, which has hurt our community. It's time to bring our nation together, to give people dignity and pride with secure, affordable homes, decent, well-paid work, and our environment protected and fit for my son to grow up in. And in my eyes, there's only one man for the job. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our leader, our next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you very much. I think first of all we should express our sympathies to the family of the poor woman who was stabbed to death last night in Russell Square, and thank the police for the action they took very quickly to make the area safe. And this is an appalling event that happened. I would urge no one to speculate on the reasons or the causes for it, but to be grateful that we have efficient emergency services that are able to bring about some safety for that area at the present time. I want to thank Faye for what she just said. Absolutely amazing story, and brilliant that she's able to be here today to describe it to us, because she put in a nutshell many of the struggles that people face all across this country. She is campaigning for decency for people with disabilities, and somewhere along the line we seem to have turned the clock back. Throughout my political life, we all campaigned to try and achieve a Disability Discrimination Act, equality and fairness and treatment of people, and the idea that everyone can make their contribution to society. The attempt to take away personal independence payments was a step in absolutely the wrong direction. She also pointed out the way in which people like her, who were determined and committed to achieve the best education they can, end up deeply in debt, and therefore the next generation deterred from doing so. Well done her for everything she said today, but well done her for encapsulating that spirit that is there in the Labour Party, that is there in the Labour movement, that is there in all communities, to get together, campaign for decency, for justice and inclusion of all people in our society, and thus pressurise the whole political system, unlock it from the elites, open it up to the mass of the people in order to change politics in our society. Faye, thank you very much for everything you said this morning. This morning, the purpose of our event is to set out the 10 important points that we're putting forward in our leadership campaign. They will, of course, be fleshed out as the campaign goes on, and we've already held a number of events around the country, and this afternoon we're travelling to South Wales for a debate this evening, and then a number of events all over Wales, and then we're heading southwestwards to Cornwall, and then all along the south coast. We're covering every single part of the UK in our campaign and getting a great response and huge attendances at events and rallies all across the country. So the 10 pledges we're setting out today to rebuild and transform Britain are essentially on the principle that no one and no one part of the country should be left behind. And I want to say thank you to those that invite us here today, because this development here is an example of what can be done, and setting up a school that's going to specialise in engineering is exactly what this country needs. Development of skills to develop an expanded manufacturing base for our society. So our first principle is that prosperity that a few enjoy is not shared by the many. Our economic model in Britain is broken, but there are immense potentials and skills in the talents of our people, and huge opportunities ahead of us in science, technology and culture. We could all be living richer lives in a sustainable, more prosperous and more caring society. But for too long, too many communities in Britain have been neglected, too many people's potential has been left untapped and their talents undeveloped. So we're going to invest in those communities and invest in our people. We take risks of Britain being left behind. Don't take it from me. The CBI, not necessarily our natural allies, says that Britain has the worst infrastructure of any of the OECD countries. It's not happened by accident. This is a failure of our economic model, the economic model of privatise and neglect. This government isn't the only one to blame, but it is the most gratuitous with their failed austerity model of turbo-Thatcherism. George Osborne cut government investment, the investment that provides a platform for people and businesses to thrive. The Tory government cut research spending by £1 billion in real terms. How on earth are we going to become a strong modern economy if we cut science funding? They cut subsidies in renewables, the energy of the future. Germany and the US are pouring money into this. That's why we've announced a national investment bank to help channel 500 billion of investment over the next decade. We'll invest in housing to secure homes for our people. We'll invest in high-speed broadband businesses need and stop languishing behind even Bulgaria and Romania. We'll invest in renewable energy to transition to a low-carbon economy, which will actually provide energy for all of us in a more environmentally sustainable way. We'll invest in our transport network to better connect our cities and towns, especially in the north. And we'll invest in the sectors and industries that create the high-wage, high-skill, high-productivity jobs of the future. Britain has got to catch up, or we will all be left behind. The neglect of our country must end. We need a Labour government that rebuilds and transforms Britain. We'll build an economy that works for all, with good jobs in every single part of the country, and I'm utterly determined we shall reach the whole of the country so that at the end of the first term of the Labour government, we won't be talking about left behind Britain. We'll be talking about inclusion in Britain. Too many people in Britain today don't have a secure home. The number of families in temporary accommodation has risen every year under the Tories. Last year, 100,000 children weren't living in a home they could call their own. In every year under this Conservative government, street homelessness has risen too. This is the result of Tory neglect, the lowest level of house building since the 1920s, and grotesque policies like the benefit cap and the bedroom tax that force people out of a home. Everyone deserves the right to a secure place to live, but too many are squeezed into poor quality housing, paying too much and getting too little. Too many private tenants live at the mercy of an unforgiving property market where a few unscrupulous landlords have free rein, and too many people, young people, have no real prospect of ever owning their own home. Many unable to save for a mortgage because the sky-high rents take up too much of their wages, so they pay so much they can't save anything. And many people can't afford to buy because a few rich have turned housing into an investment opportunity. The Tories think £250,000 is affordable for a starter home, £450,000 in London. They live in a different world, out of touch with the reality of life for millions of people in Britain. We will build at least 1 million decent, secure homes in our first term in office. We'll build at least 500,000 council houses so that a new generation can enjoy the security and tenure that affordable rents that of previous generations. They're the ones who benefited from council tenancies. We want the rest to be able to do so. For private renters, we will legislate to introduce rent controls implemented by local authorities and bring back security of tenure. So Labour gives a secure homes guarantee. And because we believe in joined-up government, we'll use the National Investment Bank to give discounted loans for zero-carbon homes and to increase regulation to encourage low-carbon homes. The housing crisis is very, very serious in this country. And it's something sad and a lesson that all should learn. If you stand outside most of our parks at night, as the parks are being locked up by the park keepers, the people that are going in are the homeless looking for a bench to sleep on for the night. Is that right? Is it necessary? Is it proper in modern Britain, one of our richest societies? We've got to change on housing. For millions of people, work is no longer a source of stability, but a source of anxiety. For 6 million people earning less than the living wage, for the hundreds of thousands of people on 0 hours contracts who don't know when they'll be working or working at all. As we believe and rebuild and transform our country, we'll put an end to the exploitation and injustice of low-paid, insecure work. Our house building programme will create 120,000 jobs per year. Backed up by investment, our industrial strategy will build the new clean industries of the future, powering the transition to a low-carbon society and creating 1 million good, secure jobs to restore dignity at work and pride in our communities. So Labour will tackle insecurity at home and at work, backed up by strong employment and trade union rights. With strong equal rights for all workers from day one, whether full-time or part-time, permanent or temporary, by ending zero-hours contracts, by legislating for collective bargaining in large employers and across sectors, and by ensuring that Britain complies with international labour organisation conventions. It seems a bit odd that I should stand here and say that Britain doesn't even comply fully with ILO conventions. We will make work secure. And if anyone has any doubts about just how bad some of our employers are in modern Britain, and there are some who are very good, I urge them to read the Select Committee report on Sport Direct and its treatment of its workers. That is an example of how bad things have got in modern Britain. Our National Health Service is the proudest creation of the Labour Party, but it is under threat like it has never been under threat before. From a Tory government that has legislated for ever-increasing competition and privatisation, and has put the NHS in record deficit on the brink of disaster in many areas. Almost every hospital has deep debts at the present time and is contemplating either being allowed to borrow more or cut. The government has cut public health spending and cut mental health services and cut social care. I am absolutely determined that we will change the mood music, the message and the resources available to deal with the mental health crisis in this country, and change the language that's used about people that suffer mental health difficulties. 1 in 4 of us in our lifetime are going to go through a crisis. Let's reach out to them, not condemn them. Help them, not deny them. Accident and emergencies services are in crisis. Waiting times are rising. So the first thing we will do is repeal the Health and Social Care Act, and we will effectively renationalise the National Health Service, making it the National Health Service, ending the creeping, nay, perhaps galloping privatisation that's going on within our NHS. This is not another top-down reorganisation, but working with NHS staff and managers to unpick the damage and waste that this government has imposed on the NHS over the past 6 years. And as I said, I take very seriously the issues of mental health. So we will restore mental health services and create true parity of esteem for the treatment of physical as well as mental health within the National Health Service. There is a huge issue concerning social care. There has to be integration of NHS and social care for the elderly and disabled people, funding dignity across the board. Too many people are stuck in hospital when they should be treated by adult social care, but the local government cuts have made the adult social care unavailable. Hence, there is a process almost of bed blocking within our hospitals. It's expensive, it's unfair, and it's not the right way of treating people who need help. That surely is the function of a decent, caring society. So we will, Labour, secure our National Health Service and the social care service that goes with it. In education, and I already paid tribute and compliment to the new school that's opening here because I believe we have to develop the skills of everybody. To be a cornerstone of any successful economy in the 21st century is how good we are at education. So we want to develop a national education service open to all throughout their lives. We'll not do what the Tories are doing, slashing funding for adult education and colleges. We'll not increase fees for courses, but cut them. On the way to making education what it should be, an opportunity for all, the opportunity to improve your skills and open your mind. So we want to invest 500 billion in our country. That investment will come with strings attached on employers to create good quality apprenticeships. Too many of what the Tories call apprenticeships are low-quality excuses to pay young people below the minimum wage. We will stop that exploitation and ensure our young people are trained and educated, not exploited as their first brush with the world of work. We'll work with employers and trade unions and sector skills councils to give young people real opportunities to develop in high-skill, high-wage industries. Joined up government and give the next generation the best start in life, and help parents we'll extend free hours towards universal child care. A universal education service open to all, providing opportunity from cradle to grave. The experience of a school should be an opening of a child's mind, their experience of developing their skills, their imagination, and everything else, right through to university education or college education. We need a changed attitude towards education, just as much as we need a changed attitude and much greater access to a cultural society and access to music, dance, theatre, and all those great things for every child, not just for those whose parents can afford to send them privately to be trained in those skills. Britain needs to get back on track on the environment with meeting our climate change goals. Nearly 80% of our environmental protections come from European Union legislation. And we cannot allow the referendum vote to turn us back into being the dirty country of Europe. Our National Investment Bank will drive the expansion of green industries, accelerating the transition to a low-carbon economy. We have to manage that transition through an active industrial strategy to ensure that old skills aren't lost as well as new skills are learned. No one and nowhere must be left behind. We will democratise energy by investment in community-owned energy schemes, literally devolving power, energy for the 60 million, not the big 6. Labour will take action to secure our environment. Quite simply, we have to work internationally on environmental issues. Air pollution doesn't recognise national boundaries. Water pollution doesn't recognise national boundaries. You have to work internationally to secure an environment that's fit for all of us in the rest of this century. As the Tory austerity has ravaged our countries, it's already the most deprived areas that have been hit the hardest. So we will ensure that our network of regional investment banks works to empower local councils, giving them investment in the communities they need, housing, energy, and also in parks, arts and leisure. We'll give councils more powers and remove obstacles to bring services back in-house. And re-regulate the buses. Unlike the Tories, who want to remove the right of councils to run municipal bus services, Labour will encourage publicly owned and publicly responsive bus services in urban areas as well as rural areas, many of which have no bus service whatsoever. So if you're poor and living in a rural area, you can't move. If you're rich enough to own a car in a rural area, you can get about. We need buses for everybody, just as much as we need properly regulated buses in every urban area. London has a good system of regulated buses. The rest of the country deserves at least as good or better than we have in London here, where we are today. Ending what I think is actually legalised larceny of the private railway system will help to end rip-off Britain. The train operating companies need to be brought into public ownership and public management of them. Labour will put the public back into our economy and our services. When we were elected in 1997 by that landslide win, sadly some people in our party were relaxed about people becoming filthy rich. Chief executives earned around 50 times the average of their workers. That was bad then in 1997. Here we are now in 2016, and the average executive pay compared to that of the worker in the same company is a multiplier of 200. In other words, 200 times more than the person working in the office or on the shop floor. We are the most unequal country in Europe concerning wages that are paid within major corporations and major institutions. So we want to boost wages of the poorest through making the minimum wage the living wage without exceptions of at least £10 per hour by 2020. We will reconfigure our tax system to create a more equal society and clamp down very hard on those who would avoid their taxes or squirrel them away into tax havens around the world. We will collect the taxes. We'll raise $10 billion from tightening corporation tax reliefs and bring headline rates back to levels in George Osborne's first term. We'll introduce mandatory equal pay audits to stop women, disabled workers and black and minority ethnic workers from being discriminated against and exploited. There is a grotesque level of inequality in our society, and a Labour government will tackle that. We'll cut income and wealth inequality. We are very serious about creating a more equal Britain with real opportunities for all. from all parts of our society. Prejudice and discrimination still scar this country. The horrifying rise in racially motivated violence and hate speech in the wake of the referendum should shame us all. But the fact that institutional racism continues in our criminal justice system should shame us too. Black and minority ethnic people are still more likely to be stopped and searched, more likely to be charged, more likely to be sentenced, and more likely to receive a harsher sentence. Domestic violence now makes up 15% of all reported crime, and 2 women a week die in the hands of their partner or often ex-partner. Labour will ensure that refuges are properly funded, that the criminal justice system treats women with sensitivity and respect, and we will introduce compulsory lessons in schools that cover sex, consent and healthy relationships. And will restore dignity and respect to a social security system that has penalised and demonised people with disabilities. We stopped the 4.4 billion cuts to disabled people's personal independence payments and will end the indignity of the current work capability assessment system that sadly sometimes leads in suicides of people that have been deemed fit for work when they clearly are not. One of the great achievements of the Labour Party was passing the Human Rights Act into law. If the Tories repeal it, we'll bring it back. But we will do everything we can to defend the Human Rights Act in Parliament, in this Parliament, to ensure that we have the same human rights in Britain as everybody else enjoys all across this continent. We will take action to make Britain a more equal society. Conflict resolution and human rights ought to be at the heart of our foreign policy. So we will work through the United Nations and continue to work with the European Union to coordinate our efforts, including tackling in a decent, humane way the appalling refugee crisis that doesn't just affect Europe, that infects many, many parts of the world. A month ago, I apologised on behalf of our party for the war in Iraq, an aggressive war that left Britain and the world less safe and damaged our standing around the world. But it's not enough to apologise. Labour must work for a more peaceful world and resolve conflict through diplomacy and dialogue. We must also speak out against injustice, whether that's atrocities being committed in Aleppo by Assad forces or the war crimes in Yemen committed by Saudi Arabia, some of those weapons made in Britain and sold to Saudi Arabia. We must also build human rights into our international trade policy. We'll put peace and justice at the heart of our foreign policy. These are the pledges for a Labour government to transform and rebuild Britain. Transforming and rebuilding Britain physically, socially and morally. We will ensure that no one and nowhere is left behind. With the talent and skills in this country, we can achieve so much more. Those are the themes we're putting out in this leadership campaign. Those are the themes that I believe will be embraced by the Labour Party and Labour supporters around the country. As we build towards a general election, offering an alternative of a different way of doing things, where you ignore nobody, you forget nobody, you build that sense of inclusion and decency and moral respect within our society. This campaign is taking that message out, yes, to Labour Party members and supporters and affiliates and trade union affiliates, but it's also a campaign for the entire public to be involved in. This is a preparation for a general election when we can win that general election and produce decency and real opportunity for everybody in our society. Thank you very much.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn with a pretty full speech there in which he laid out 10 pledges which, as he said, he'll be taking around the country, not just to Labour Party members, but also to the public at large by way of preparation for a general election. Sarah Hadji-Kaberi is there to reflect on what Jeremy Corbyn has been saying and will be doing this evening. Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn isn't the most rousing political orator. That speech, it wasn't the most enthusiastic or the most exciting. However, he is very much a principled politician, and that was his 10 principles, his 10 core issues that he would like to highlight as leader of the Labour Party, but ultimately, he hopes, as Prime Minister. core things that he picked out: the NHS. He was talking about the Conservative Party privatising the NHS. He says he would halt that immediately. Job insecurity, that was something also he's been very big on. 0 hours contracts, he would ban that. Housing, the fact that a lot of young people can't afford their own homes, so that's another core issue for the Labour Party. Now, not to be outdone, yesterday we had Owen Smith. Forget 10 values, he had 20 principles that he put forward yesterday. The two politicians are both on the left of the Labour Party, actually very similar in terms of policies. Where they really differ is in personality, and we will hopefully see that tonight in Cardiff at the first of the leadership hustings.
Much indeed.